Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. In Afghanistan, 11 civilians and Afghan troops have been killed in a series of attacks across the country. The government has blamed the Taliban for the violence. Meanwhile, a statement by the group said nearly 100 civilians were killed or wounded in government attacks over the past 2 weeks. Iran says the Gulf Cooperation Council is trying to derail the ongoing talks on the 2015 nuclear deal in Vienna. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh also denounced the bloc's demand to include its concerns in the talks as irresponsible. Earlier, leaders of the GCC and Arab League slammed Tehran's decision to raise the uranium enrichment level to 60%. In Myanmar, protesters in Yangon Commercial District have welcomed the parallel unity government to confront the military. Meanwhile, security forces shot dead 2 demonstrators in the ruby mining town of Mogok. Myanmar has been in upheaval since the military ousted Aung San Suu Kyi, with the junta killing 728 people. In Bangladesh, 5 people have been shot dead and dozens others wounded as police opened fire on workers at a power plant in Chittagong. They were protesting over unpaid wages, extra working hours and alleged discrimination. India has logged a record spike in coronavirus-related deaths with more than 1,300 fatalities in the past 24 hours. It also reported the highest increase in cases for the 5th straight day, with nearly 234,000 new infections. Here in Pakistan, the death toll has surpassed 16,000 after 112 deaths were recorded overnight. Nearly 5,000 people tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours, with the tally crossing 750,000. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 3 million lives and infected more than 139 million people so far. And in the English Premier League, Newcastle United beat 10-man West Ham 3-2 at St James Park. Joe Willock scored the winner in the 82nd minute to seal 3 crucial points for Newcastle. West Ham are still on the 4th spot with 44 points, while Newcastle are 9 points above the relegation zone. These were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Let's start from Afghanistan, where 11 civilians and Afghan troops have been killed in a series of attacks across the country. According to government officials, at least 4 civilians were killed in a roadside bomb blast in Kandahar, while 6 soldiers were killed in separate attacks in Faryab, Balkh and Baghdiz province. The government has blamed the Taliban for the violence. Meanwhile, a statement by the group said nearly 100 civilians were killed or wounded in government attacks over the past 2 weeks. Violence remains rampant in Afghanistan despite the ongoing peace efforts to end the conflict. Now, the US says any terrorist attack on the military drawdown troops or allies in Afghanistan will be met very forcefully. At a news conference, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said Washington is well aware of Taliban threats. Kirby said it would be imprudent for the US not to take these threats seriously. He added it would also be improper for the Taliban to not take seriously what President Joe Biden has made clear. Kirby said there may be some additional enabling capabilities added to Afghanistan for a short time. He said this will help bring about a safe, orderly and deliberately planned drawdown. The press secretary said the US also plans to remove at least some contractors from Afghanistan. Now, Iran says the Gulf Cooperation Council is trying to derail the ongoing talks on the 2015 nuclear deal in Vienna. This comes after the GCC and Arab League condemned Tehran's uranium enrichment program and asked the negotiating parties to include their concerns in the talks. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh denounced the bloc's demand as irresponsible. He said Iran is a member of the International Atomic Energy Agency and all its nuclear activities are being monitored. He also said Arab leaders should direct their concerns towards Israel's illegal nuclear activities. Talks in Vienna are ongoing, aimed at returning the US and Iran to full compliance with the nuclear agreement. Earlier, US President Joe Biden called Iran's uranium enrichment unhelpful for the dialogue. Also, Iran says it has identified the person behind the recent explosion at its main NATANZ nuclear plant. Iranian Ministry of Intelligence said Reza Karimi was an agent and has fled Iran. The ministry said necessary steps are underway for his arrest and return to Iran through legal channels. The Intelligence Ministry did not mention which country the agent belongs to, but Iran has accused Israel multiple times of ordering the attack on its critical nuclear infrastructure. Now moving to Myanmar, where protesters in Yangon Commercial District have welcomed the parallel unity government to confront the military. Myanmar has been in upheaval since the military ousted Aung San Suu Kyi, with the junta killing 728 people. Demonstrations in Yangon continue to call for their new ceasefire. Dozens waited for an opportunity between police patrolling to quickly gather in the street. In the ruby mining town of Mogok, security forces shot dead 2 more demonstrators. Meanwhile, the junta chief will attend an Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Indonesia on the 24th of April. A Thai Foreign Ministry spokesperson confirmed Min Aung Hlaing's first known foreign trip since the coup. Now, China says talks between the US and Japan have gone beyond bilateral relations and harm third-party interests. Earlier, US President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga vowed to work together to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific.
It said Taiwan, Hong Kong and Xinjiang are China's internal affairs and should not be interfered with. Biden met with Suga in his first face-to-face White House summit since taking office. In a joint statement, the two leaders underscored the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The statement read, they encouraged a peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues. Later, addressing a think tank, Japanese Prime Minister called for a stable and constructive relationship with China.
Japan's basic policy on pending issues caused by China is to firmly assert what should be asserted and strongly request China to take specific action. At the same time, we must work to establish a stable and constructive relationship with China and keep in close partnership with the United States and other like-minded nations.
The US and Japan also agreed to invest together in areas such as 5G and chip supply chains. Washington pledged $2.5 billion, while Tokyo $2 billion to strengthen digital competitiveness.
Now, the US says Russia's decision to expel 10 American diplomats is escalatory and regrettable. This comes as Russia told the US diplomats to leave the country after Washington imposed sanctions. A State Department spokesperson said it is not in US interest to get into an escalatory cycle. But the spokesperson said Washington reserves the right to respond to any Russian retaliation. The State Department said US sanctions were proportionate to Russia's harmful activities. Earlier, Moscow also banned 8 high-ranking current and former US officials from entering Russia. Those banned include Director FBI, Director of National Intelligence and the US Attorney General. Now, at least 2 Palestinians have been injured in Israeli air raid on the besieged Gaza Strip for the 2nd day in a row. Palestinian media said 3 rockets destroyed several settlements and damaged civilian homes. It said missiles were also fired at an open agricultural land between Rafah and Khan Yunis cities. Meanwhile, the Israeli military said it launched the assault on alleged Hamas targets after a rocket was fired from Gaza. Earlier, the occupying forces injured 11 Palestinians in a crackdown on protesters in West Bank and Jerusalem. Now moving to Bangladesh, where 5 people have been shot dead and dozens others wounded as police opened fire on workers at a power plant in Chittagong. They were protesting over unpaid wages, extra working hours and alleged discrimination. Police say they were forced to open fire when protesters attacked them at the power plant. They said efforts to control the situation are underway. The $2.4 billion power plant is a major source of foreign investment into Bangladesh. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says many in the West deliberately indulge in Islamophobia under the guise of free speech. In a tweet, Khan demanded an apology from such extremists for hurting the sentiments of Muslims. But he said the perpetrators lack moral sense and courage to apologize to the Muslims. He said the Western governments that outlawed any negative comment on the Holocaust should penalize Muslim haters similarly. Khan said any disrespect and abuse directed towards the Prophet will not be tolerated. Recording the recent action against the TLP, Khan said, "No one is above the law and constitution." Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi is in Dubai on a 3-day official visit to the UAE. The Foreign Office says the two countries enjoy strong ties rooted in common faith and shared history and values. In a statement, it said Qureshi will discuss bilateral cooperation and regional and global issues of mutual interest with the UAE leadership. The Foreign Minister will also call on his counterpart, His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Qureshi will also meet the Pakistani diaspora and interact with local and international media. Now in Pakistan, Shibli Faraz and Shaukat Tareen have been sworn in as federal ministers by President Arif Alvi in a ceremony held in Islamabad. Faraz will take charge as Minister for Science and Technology, while Tareen will henceforth be Minister for Finance. Prime Minister Imran Khan reshuffled his cabinet and decided to appoint Tareen as the new Finance Minister. Tareen replaced Federal Minister Hamad Azhar, who was appointed Finance Minister only a few weeks ago. Meanwhile, Federal Minister Fawad Chaudhry replaced Faraz as Information Minister, while the latter took charge of Science and Technology Ministry. Last month, then Senator Faraz had said that the Premier aimed to reshuffle the cabinet as he wanted to bring in a new team. Now in Pakistan, the death toll from the new coronavirus has crossed 16,000 mark. This comes after the virus claimed another 112 lives in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry said nearly 5,000 people tested positive overnight. The caseload has crossed 750,000, out of which nearly 655,000 people have recovered. It said there are more than 79,000 active cases across the country. The ministry said just over 4,100 patients are in critical condition. Meanwhile, Pakistan's envoy to UN has urged for universal vaccination to overcome the pandemic and its fallout. Meanwhile, India has logged a record spike in coronavirus-related deaths with more than 1,300 fatalities in the past 24 hours. It also reported the highest increase in cases for the 5th straight day, with nearly 234,000 new infections. Globally, the virus has claimed nearly 3 billion lives and infected more than 139 million people so far. More about the pandemic in this report.
While this week saw a record number of COVID-19 cases in many parts of the world, setbacks to vaccination drive also contributed to government's troubles. Chile says China's Sinovac vaccine, CoronaVac, is 67% effective in the first real-world study of the shot. The U.S. drug regulator has revoked emergency authorization of Eli Lilly's monoclonal antibody treatment when used on its own. Meanwhile, 21 U.S. states recorded at least a 10% rise in daily average positive cases.
In concert with the increase in cases, the 7-day average of emergency department visits, hospital admissions, and hospitalizations are all approximately 5 to 8% higher than they were in the prior 7-day period. And sadly, average daily deaths have increased for the 3rd day in a row.
U.S. pharmaceutical company Moderna says it is struggling to supply promised shots to UK because of issues with increasing production at its European plant. Johnson & Johnson has refuted claims that the design of its COVID-19 vaccine may explain why it has been linked to rare brain blood clots. The World Health Organization says the strain that emerged in India can bring about increased transmissibility.
Having two of these mutations, which have been seen in other variants around the world, are concerning because there's a similarity in these mutations that confer increased transmissibility, for example, and some of these mutations also result in reduced neutralization, which may have an impact on our countermeasures, including the vaccines.
The world's largest vaccine maker in India has asked the U.S. president to lift a ban on exporting raw materials needed to make more shots. In Spain, Madrid's public health chief says the shortage of shots may force the region to close down vaccination centers next week.
We still have news for you in this news bulletin, but after a short break, stay with us. Welcome back. Now, in the United Kingdom, Prince Philip has been laid to rest after an intimate funeral at St. George's Chapel. Windsor Castle Philip, officially known as the Duke of Edinburgh, died aged 99 on the 9th of April. The ceremony was attended by only 30 people, including members of the royal family, due to COVID-19 restrictions. Military bands paid last tributes to the prince, while the Archbishop of Canterbury followed with the blessing. Ahead of the service, the Duke's children walked behind his coffin in a funeral procession, and there was a minute's silence to honour the late prince. Now, Eritrea has publicly acknowledged its presence in Ethiopia's Tigray region for the first time. In a letter to the United Nations Security Council, Asmara agreed to start withdrawing troops from the area. Asmara's UN envoy, Sophia, said the looming grave threat in Tigray has been largely thwarted. Sophia said Ethiopian contingents will simultaneously be redeployed along the international boundary. She said the priority should be the delivery of aid to civilians in Tigray. Sophia said the allegations of rape and other crimes lodged against Eritrean soldiers are outrageous. The envoy added that it is a vicious attack on the culture and history of Eritrea's people. Now, in the US state of Minnesota, hundreds of protesters have clashed with the police outside Brooklyn Center's police headquarters. Police arrested dozens as the civil unrest over the killing of a young black man carried into the sixth consecutive night. Demonstrators threw objects at the officers, who in turn used tear gas and flashbangs. Now, this comes after the former police officer who shot Dawn Wright was charged with second-degree manslaughter. But charges against her have failed to appease the protesters, as Wright's family says they fall short of justice. Meanwhile, hundreds of Chicagoans took to the streets in solidarity with the family of Adam Toledo. The 13-year-old boy was shot dead by police on the 29th of March. Now, US President Joe Biden has called for an end to gun violence in the country, calling it a national embarrassment. This comes a day after a shooter killed 8 people and himself at a FedEx core facility in Indianapolis. Talking to reporters, he urged Congress to step up and address the issue of gun violence. Biden called for a ban on assault weapons and magazines that hold more than 10 bullets.
This has to end. It's a national embarrassment. It is a national embarrassment what's going on. And it's not only these mass shootings that are occurring. Every single day, there's a mass shooting in the United States if you count all those who were killed out in the streets of our cities and our rural areas. It's a national embarrassment and must come to an end.
Well, now 3 astronauts have returned to Earth from the International Space Station. Russia's Roscosmos space agencies, they landed in Kazakhstan on a SOYUZ MS-17 spacecraft. The spacecraft was carrying NASA astronaut Kate Rubins, the first person to sequence DNA in space. It also brought back home 2 Russian cosmonauts, Sergei Ryzhkov and Sergei Kodsverko. The 3 had been at the space station since mid-October 2020. Their mission was the last scheduled Russian flight carrying a U.S. crew member. It marks an end to a long dependency as the U.S. revives its own crew launch capability to drive down the cost of sending people into space. Now, NASA has picked Elon Musk's SPACEX to develop the first commercial lander and take the next 2 U.S. astronauts to the moon. The contract is worth $2.9 billion and is part of NASA's Artemis program. NASA picked SPACEX over Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin and defense contractor Dynetics Singh. The agency said the SpaceX Starship will include a spacious cabin and 2 airlocks for moonwalks. NASA's acting administrator Steve said the agency has the next landing shot at 2024. On Twitter, SpaceX said it is humbled to help the U.S. Space Agency usher in a new era of human space exploration. More news coming up after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, in the Netherlands, pandemic-related restrictions have compelled a luxury hotel in Amsterdam to offer a takeaway burger for $23. Let's find out about the burger in this report. Amid the closure of dining rooms in the Netherlands, Dutch hotels and restaurants have been forced to offer takeaway meals. The Waldorf Astoria Hotel in Amsterdam, with the 2 Michelin star chefs and rooms starting at $700, initially balked at the idea of offering burgers for delivery. Then reality hit. Chefs decided the most luxurious hotel in the country decided to offer a takeaway burger for $23. The Waldorf signature burger comes with a 240-gram Holstein Friesian meat patty and is served with English Duke of Berkshire bacon on a French brioche bun and aged Dutch cheese with homemade relish.
Well, being the most luxurious hotel in the country, I was a bit skeptical. But I had a great team and they convinced me to do it. The only thing I said, if we're going to do it, it got to be something so special, it got to be spectacular, and that's we can do it. And they convinced me. We came up with the idea of the box. I loved it, and so I said, it's a surprise, it's luxury, it looks good, we can go with it.
Now, hundreds of burgers are being delivered every week, while the meal has also been awarded 4.8 stars out of 5 by Uber Eats reviewers. However, it still does not compensate for a prolonged ban on inside dining that could be extended by months.
I was a little bit against it because I'm not a big fan of sending food out what is warm, what is hot. And so I was a little bit nervous, like, is it going to be good? Is it going to be okay? So we did a lot of trial cookings. How many minutes it takes from here in the kitchen to the guest at home who is going to eat the burger. Because for me, the most important thing was that the burger need to be the best burger what you can buy here in Amsterdam.
Dutch plans to ease some COVID-19 measures next week turned out to be too optimistic and have been pushed back until April 28th at the earliest. When the Waldorf Astoria does reopen, it will have a tasty dilemma whether the popular burger stays on its exclusive menu or not. Well, now in Spain, a school has taken its classes to the beach for some fresh air after congested online learning due to the pandemic.
Online schooling and the absence of extracurricular activities for over a year has surely put a toll on pupils. However, these Spanish scholars have found a way to escape by taking their classroom to the beach. The classes are conducted on the sandy shores of Playa de los Nietos Beach. The teachers begin preparations at 8 a.m. before the children come and sit over the neatly spaced out green desk rows.
It's something completely amazing. It's completely amazing because the children arrived the next day to school and they're delighted. They feel like they are doing something different from other schools, and then they are asking, when are we going to go again? When are we going to go to the beach again?
Alongside their schoolwork, the children also have fun by running around in the sand and playing the xylophones. The pupils are aged from 3 to 12 and remain in their class bubbles.
People from the village, the fishermen, taught the students how to fish, how to live. They identified the economy that is suffering so much and how they themselves have been able to feed us in the times of pandemic. It is very important for them to know that fish are not in the supermarket, that the fish are in the sea and we have to catch them.
The beach lessons are part of a broader project known as Fresh Air. It aims to create better air quality for children during the ongoing pandemic, including through open-air learning.
Now, climbers Sirbaz Khan and Abdul Joshi have become the first Pakistanis to reach the summit of over 8,000 metres of the Annapurna peak in Nepal. Braving tons of snow and thunderstorm, the two climbers dedicated their expedition to late Pakistani mountaineer Muhammad Ali Satpara. They made their first attempt to the 10th highest peak of the world on April 13th, but were unable to succeed. The duo hoisted Pakistan's flag on the peak after summiting the mountain. Following their summit, congratulatory messages poured in from across the world. Now in the English Premier League, Newcastle United beat 10-man West Ham 3-2 at St James Park. Newcastle were 2-0 up at the interval thanks to a tap-in by Joe Linton and an own goal from Asa Diop. West Ham levelled in the second half with goals from Diop and Jesse Lingard, but an 82nd minute goal from Joe Willock decided to game and secure 3 crucial points for Newcastle. The Hammers remain fourth with 44 points, while Newcastle are 9 points above the relegation zone. Now in motorsports, Lewis Hamilton has taken the pole ahead of the Red Bull Sergio Perez in qualifying session at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Perez was a fraction of a second faster than teammate Max Verstappen. Charles Leclerc put the Ferrari fourth, while Valtteri Bottas was eighth in the second Mercedes. Lando Norris went second fastest in the McLaren, but had his lap time deleted for exceeding track limits and was seventh. Hamilton leads the overall driver standings with a win in the first race held in Bahrain. Now in golf, Stuart King has taken a commanding 5-shot second-round lead at the RBC Heritage in Hilton Head, South California. Two-time former champion Singh carded his second consecutive 8 under 63 to finish at 16 under 126. Singh posted a bogey-free second round, making an eagle on the par 5 second hole, followed by 6 birdies. Canadian Curry Connors stands second after he shot 64 to finish at 11 under. Argentina's Emiliano Guerrillo matched Connors 64 and stands in third place at 10 under. Meanwhile, defending champion Webb Simpson shot 68 and stands tied for 40th. Now let's have a look at the weather updates from around the world. With that, we come to the end of this news bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News. Take care.